After my father died, I found a box hidden in his attic, and it turned out he had a second family, and I learned that my own wife might be my half-sister. It all started when my father died on Thursday. It wasn't sudden. He'd been sick for months, some long, slow unraveling that made him smaller each time I visited. But even when the doctor told us he had maybe a week left, I still didn't think the moment would actually come. You grow up thinking your parents are some sort of unshakable constant. Until they're not. He passed in his sleep. Peacefully, they said. I guess that's the best you can hope for. The funeral was held on a cold, damp Sunday. Small service. Closed casket. My mom stood like stone through most of it, only blinking hard when people tried to hug her too long. She and Dad hadn't been close in years. I knew that. Everyone knew that. But grief's funny like that. It doesn't always stick where it should. Afterward, people drifted back to their cars in the drizzle, murmuring cliches about how he was in a better place, and I went back to the house to help Mom start clearing things out. She wanted to sell the place. Too many memories, she said, or maybe not enough of the right ones. So I started in the attic. The light up there barely worked, just one of those pull-chain bulbs with a lazy yellow glow. Dust clung to everything like it was trying to preserve the past in layers. Boxes, old chairs, Christmas stuff we hadn't touched since I was a kid. That's when I saw it. A small metal lockbox tucked behind the air ducts, under a moldy tarp. Heavy. Locked. It had that, you weren't supposed to find me look. And of course, I opened it. The lock had already rusted, and a flathead screwdriver from Dad's tool bench made quick work of it. Inside were old letters. Envelopes, stacked by year. Photos. A few documents clipped together. Nothing illegal or explosive at first glance. Just old, private stuff. But then I saw the photo that stopped my heart. My dad. Younger, full head of hair, grinning in that crooked way he used to when he wasn't being serious. Standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. Brown hair, warm eyes. Holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. The baby had a hospital bracelet on. I flipped the photo over. Nora, 1992. My chest tightened. My wife's name is Nora, and she was born in 1992. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. A common name. But I already knew, deep down, it wasn't. The next photo confirmed it. Same woman. Same baby. But this time, a little older, maybe a year old. And in the background, unmistakable, the bench at Franklin Park. The same bench Nora once told me she'd fallen off when she was a toddler, busting her chin open. I felt like I'd been punched in the lungs. I rifled through the letters, hands trembling. They were written by my father. Every single one addressed to Emma, the woman in the photo. Each dated once a year. Each signed Love Always, T. My dad's name was Thomas. The last letter was dated April 2003. That was the year he started working late, all the time. I couldn't make sense of it. Couldn't breathe right. Nora and I had been married for 5 years. We met in college, senior year. Fell fast. Fast enough to worry our parents. But when she met my mom and dad, there was no sign of recognition on either side. Nothing weird. Just polite, slightly awkward small talk. I never met her mother. She passed away when Nora was 16. She didn't like talking about her. Just said she was kind, but sick a lot, and that everything was a little blurry from those years. I'd always respected her silence. Now I wondered if that silence was hiding this. That night, I sat in the attic for hours, cross-legged on the plywood floor, reading every letter. My dad had loved this woman, Emma, talked about missing her, wrote about holidays he wished he could spend with them, mentioned sending money, called Nora his sunshine girl, and not once, had he ever said a word about them to me. That box was a time capsule of a life I never knew he had. And the girl in those photos? Might be my wife. My heart was a drumbeat in my ears as I drove home. Nora was in the kitchen when I walked in, making tea in her usual sleepy nighttime hoodie. She smiled when she saw me. Hey baby, you okay? I kissed her forehead. Tried to smile. Yeah, I said. Just tired. Because what else could I say? Hey, I think you might be my half-sister. I didn't sleep that night. I laid there beside Nora, her breathing slow and steady, one arm draped over my chest like it always had been. I watched the shadows crawl across the ceiling and tried to breathe like everything was normal. Like my heart wasn't banging against my ribs trying to escape this moment. But my mind wouldn't stop. Her laugh, her smile, her face, now twisted in my memory, overlaid with that grainy Polaroid of the little girl in yellow. I could still see my dad's hand resting lightly on the woman's shoulder. On Emma's shoulder. Nora's mother. Which would mean? No. I needed proof. Real proof. something solid beyond my gut screaming at me. The next morning, I told Nora I needed to go back to Mom's. More cleaning, I said. She didn't question it. Just kissed me and asked me to bring back her favorite mug if I came across it. My hands were shaking when I put the car in reverse. Mom was in the garden when I pulled up, wearing those same gloves she'd had since I was a kid, the ones with the faded sunflowers on the palms. I watched her through the window for a moment, wondering what she knew, if anything. Wondering if there had ever been a moment where she looked at my father and suspected there was a whole other life waiting behind some closed door. Back so soon? She asked when I stepped out. Yeah, I said. I forgot a few things in the attic. She didn't ask questions, just nodded and went back to her roses. I climbed the attic stairs 2 at a time. I went through the rest of the box, looking for anything I'd missed. Letters, photos, documents, anything that tied my dad to Emma. Anything that connected Nora to me. And I found it. Tucked beneath an envelope marked 2001 was a folded-up medical form. A birth certificate. Name, Nora Grace Miller. Date of birth, March 9th, 1992. Mother, Emma Jean Miller. Father, Thomas Daniel Blake. My father. It wasn't a theory anymore. It was a fact. He was her father. Which made her. I had to sit down. Right there on the attic floor, that brittle certificate trembling in my hands. I don't know how long I sat like that. Long enough for my mother to call up the stairs and ask if I was still alive. I shoved the documents back into the box, closed it tight, and told her I was done for the day. But I wasn't. Not even close. I didn't go home right away. I parked a few blocks from our house, hand on the steering wheel, forehead against the leather grip, trying to decide whether to tell her. Hi, honey. I love you. Also, we might be related. Surprise. But I couldn't say nothing. Not anymore. So I went in. Nora was on the couch, legs folded beneath her, eating leftover pasta straight from the container. Her hair was a mess. She was watching Jeopardy and shouting answers between bites. She looked up and grinned. Hey, babe. Grab the other fork and help me finish this. I sat down slowly beside her. She paused the show, sensing something was off. You okay? I didn't answer right away. Just stared at her. The same eyes I'd seen in that baby photo. The same dimple on her left cheek when she smiled. The resemblance had always been there. I just never had a reason to notice. Until now. There's something I need to talk to you about, I said. Her smile dropped. Okay. What is it? I pulled out the folder I'd put in my bag. Slid it onto her lap. I found something in my dad's attic. She opened it, casually at first, and then froze. I watched her eyes move from the birth certificate to the photo. Her lips parted slightly. Her brow furrowed, like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Why is my name on this? She whispered. That's what I came here to ask you. She stared down at the certificate, finger tracing the ink like she needed to feel the texture to believe it was real. This says your dad is my dad, she said slowly. I nodded. Her voice cracked. That's not possible. I didn't say anything. My mom said his name was Tony, she whispered. Tony. She always said he left before I was born. She never talked about him. Your mom's name was Emma, right? I asked. She blinked. Yeah. Why? I pulled out the photo of Emma and my father. Because this was taken in 1992. Nora stared at it. Oh my God. Silence. You think she stopped. The word caught in her throat. You think we're related? I nodded again. Half-siblings. She stood abruptly, backing away from the couch like it had caught fire. No, she said. No. This isn't real. This can't be real. I reached for her, but she flinched. Don't, she said sharply. Just, don't. She looked down at the photo again, then back at me like I'd turned into a stranger. And maybe I had. Because in that moment, I didn't know who I was anymore. Or who she was. Or what the hell we were supposed to do next. She didn't say a word for almost 2 days. Nora stayed at her sister's place across town. Not that I blamed her. She left without packing more than a sweater and her charger, and the last thing she said to me, I don't know who you are right now, still rang in my ears every time I walked past the couch. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee that went cold hours ago, reading over those letters from the attic again and again, like some part of me thought they'd start saying something different, that I'd misread them, that maybe there was some distant cousin named Thomas Daniel Blake and this had all been a horrific coincidence. But that hope faded fast, because when you stare down the truth long enough, it stops blinking. I needed to know more. Not just about if this was real, but how. Why? My father had lived with us my entire life. He'd been at every birthday party, every school event, every Thanksgiving. And still, there he was in photo after photo, letters written every year to another family. To her. To them. The timeline wasn't just blurred. It overlapped, which meant the father I thought I knew had led 2 lives. And both of them were lies. I found her old address online, Emma's, Nora's mom. A ranch-style house on the edge of Cedarville, about 40 minutes from the city. I knew she'd passed away when Nora was in high school, but the house was still there, now owned by a cousin according to the property records. I drove out there one late afternoon, more desperate than I wanted to admit. A woman answered the door. Maybe early 40s. Kind eyes, guarded. "You're Nora's husband, right?" she asked before I even said a word. I froze. "How did you?" She called. "Said you might show up." She's upset. "Yeah, I know." I looked down, then back up at her. I need to understand." The woman hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Come in." The living room was small, but warm. Photos lined the mantel, mostly kids I didn't recognize. No trace of Emma or Nora's childhood. She brought me tea, sat down across from me, and waited. Was my father really her father? I asked. The woman, Anna, she finally told me, nodded slowly. "Yes. Your dad, Tom, was with Emma for years. Long before she got pregnant. Did he ever raise her? Was he there?" Anna looked away. "He came and went. Promised things. Never really followed through. He'd disappear for weeks. Emma stopped believing in his promises after Nora turned 2. Said it was better for her to grow up without expectations. So she told Nora his name was Tony?" Anna gave a small, bitter laugh. "Tony was her dad's name. Emma's father. She used it as a cover. Said if Nora asked, at least she wouldn't grow up thinking she was unwanted. Just someone whose dad moved away." I swallowed hard. "So she never knew? Not from her mother?" Anna looked at me sharply. "And clearly not from yours either." I nodded, shame thick in my throat. Anna softened a little. "Emma tried to keep it clean. She never asked for money. Never showed up on his doorstep. But he sent birthday cards every year until Nora turned 10. I remember, because she kept them all in a little shoebox with stars drawn on it." I winced. I'd seen that box once. Years ago. When we were moving apartments. I thought it was old school notes or drawings. I had no idea it was from him. From our father. Anna leaned forward, folding her hands. "You said you found letters?" "In his attic. After he died." She let out a breath, eyes fluttering shut for a moment. "Then he kept it." "Kept what?" "The life he chose to abandon." That night, Nora came home. I didn't know she was coming until I heard her key in the door. My heart started thudding so loud I could barely hear the knob turn. She looked tired. Pale. Like she hadn't slept either. Her hair was pulled back, and she was wearing an oversized hoodie that I recognized as mine. We stood in the kitchen, barely 3 feet apart but miles of silence between us. "I talked to Anna," I said finally. Her eyes flicked up to mine. "I figured you might." "She told me. Everything." Nora nodded. "Me too." The silence stretched between us again. I wanted to reach out to her. I wanted to hold her. But I didn't know if that was allowed anymore. I didn't know the rules now. Or if there were any. "I don't know what to do," she said softly. "Neither do I." She sat down at the table, same chair where we ate dinner every night for 5 years. Where she used to sit with her legs curled up and her laptop open while I cooked. Now she sat like she was visiting a stranger's house. "I feel sick," she whispered. Like everything in my life just collapsed. I sat across from her. "Me too." And then she asked the question I'd been afraid to ask myself. "Do you still love me?" I looked at her. Not just at her face, but at her. The woman I'd built a life with. The person I'd chosen, again and again, in every small, daily way. And without thinking, I said, "Yes." She didn't look relieved. She looked even more broken. "Then we're really screwed," she whispered. Nora stayed. That night, at least. She didn't crawl into bed with me, though. She slept on the couch with a throw pillow and a blanket I knew didn't keep anyone warm. But I didn't argue. I didn't say a word. There are some moments where silence feels like the only honest language. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the ways I'd loved her without even knowing the truth. Every version of our story played in my head. Our first date, the road trip up to Portland where we got lost and laughed so hard we couldn't breathe, the time she cried watching that dumb animal rescue commercial and I realized I was in love. All of it still happened. But now every memory had a shadow, and I didn't know if love could survive something like that. The next morning, I found her standing in the kitchen holding a mug of coffee she hadn't touched. "I had a dream," she said quietly. "We were back in college. I was watching you across the quad. You didn't know me yet. And it felt safe." I didn't know what to say to that. I think I was afraid of what I might have dreamed. She looked up at me. What do we do now? That was the question, wasn't it? We both knew what the world would say. What people would scream from every corner of the internet if they knew. The word incest hangs like a curse, even when it's an accident, even when no one knew. Even when it was two people who fell in love in ignorance. We didn't choose this, but we were living in it now. I don't know, I said, but we can't keep pretending. I feel like a mistake, she whispered. Like I shouldn't even exist. My heart cracked. Don't say that. She didn't cry. That almost made it worse. There was no catharsis. No tears. Just a quiet collapse of everything we believed about ourselves. We spent the rest of the day in silence. Separate rooms. Parallel lives under the same roof. That evening, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a therapist. Found a specialist in family trauma. I didn't tell her the full story over the phone, just enough for her to hesitate, then say gently, "You're not the first to call me with something like this." That surprised me. The appointment was set for the next week. I told Nora later, bracing for her reaction. She just said, "Good. We need someone who isn't drowning in this." A few nights later, she came into the bedroom. "Do you think we're disgusting?" she asked, standing in the doorway. "No," I said, sitting up. "I think we're victims of someone else's lie." She nodded slowly, stepped inside. "I don't know if I can stay married to you," she said. I swallowed hard. "I know, but I don't want to stop loving you, either." That hit like a gut punch. Me neither. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her hands like they didn't belong to her. I keep thinking, if we hadn't found out, we'd still be happy. We'd still be planning that trip to Italy. Still fighting over whether we need a new couch. I nodded. I thought about that too. She turned to me, eyes glassy now. "So what does that mean? That love can survive this? Or that ignorance was the only thing holding us together?" I didn't have an answer. And I think that's when we both realized something. This wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what still existed. Because the feelings hadn't disappeared. They'd just been poisoned by knowledge. We held hands that night. Nothing more. Just held each other in that aching quiet. And for the first time since this began, I didn't feel completely alone. Less than a month had passed. We broke up. Quietly. No slamming of doors. No screaming. Just a gradual change of air, like a change in the pressure system. After all, we were living together. What else were we supposed to do? There was no set of rules for unraveling a marriage built on a genetic landmine. We kept telling people we were going through a rough patch. It was true, just like a plane crash is a hard landing. We met with a lawyer. "Don't file yet. Just ask what it is. Annulment is possible," they said, "but it's complicated." The state didn't know what to do with our situation. "It's not criminal," the lawyers said, "but it's nothing." Nora laughed at that. Just once. A blank look. That night she said, "Even if we break up, I will never be your stepsister." I told her, "I will never be the man who married you." We didn't touch after that. No hugs. No hands in the hallway. We both realized in our own ways that there was a line we would never cross again, even if we had been crossing it unconsciously for years. It wasn't what we did that haunted me. How natural it was. A week later I received an email. Subject, Estate Notice, Thomas Blake. A scanned copy of an amendment to my father's will is attached. Something that wasn't there during probate. It dates back 3 years before his death. What caught my attention wasn't the money. It was the name. A beneficiary I didn't recognize. Recipient of $25,000. Nora Blake. Not Miller. Blake. I stared at the screen, barely breathing. 3 years ago, he had added her to his will. Under his name. Which meant he knew. He knew she was his daughter. He acknowledged her. And never said a word. I confronted her that night. She didn't deny it. "I found out the summer before we got married," she said in a flat voice. I asked my aunt about some old photos. She told me. My blood turned to ice. "You knew? You knew before we got married." She barely nodded. "I didn't want to believe it," she said. "And I didn't want to lose you." I sat up, dizzy. "You let me marry you." "I loved you," she whispered. "And you loved me." I thought, maybe it didn't matter. I felt sick. It was like the floor had caved in beneath me. "So all this time," I said, "you were protecting a secret, not yourself." "No," she said quietly. "I was protecting us. But I was wrong. I see it now." She got up and left the room. Not crying. Not panicking. Just leaving. The next morning she left. Not a long goodbye. No scene. Just a folded bill on the counter. It said, "You didn't deserve this. I'm sorry for everything I've become to you." I never heard from her again. No calls. No texts. She changed her number. I assume she's alive. I assume she's somewhere rebuilding a life that should never have crossed mine.